everyone, welcome back. This is the second installment in the Homestead series. In our first video, we completed the foundation of the house. And in this video, we're going to do a couple of things. The first thing we're going to do is map out on the foundation where our walls will eventually go. And then we're going to spend some time working on the flooring. So let's get started. Okay, hopefully you can see that okay. What I did was I just took a piece of graph paper and I drew out for myself where I wanted the walls to be in this house. I want to transfer this information onto the project. The walls are going to be very similar to the base in that they're going to be two pieces of foam board glued together. And so the width of that is probably 3/8 of an inch. And so I'm going to put a 3/8 inch border all the way around the house and in every spot where the walls are going to be. So you could do that either with a ruler or I'm just going to mark using a piece of doubled foam board because that's the exact measurement. And I'm just going to go around. You can see that I've done, maybe you can see that I've done the first row here. And then I'm just going to take the board, make sure that it's lined up flush with the edge, and I'm just going to mark off sections. And then I'll go over that with my ruler to get the line all the way down. And so I'm going to do that all the way around the house. And so there's my guides. And then if I take my ruler, I'll line it up with those lines. And then just draw. So there I'll have my 3/8 of an inch border all the way around the house. And I'm going to carry on off camera around the whole exterior of the house. And then I'm going to mark off where the porch will be, the bedroom, the kitchen, and the living room area. So as you can see, I've drawn that 3/8 of an inch border everywhere that I'm going to put a wall in the house. And I've just basically gone off of my plan that I made, and because this house is what they call full scale or 1:12, 1 inch equals 1 foot, but the graph paper basically is 1 square equals 1 foot. So all I did really is just count the number of squares in between each, used my ruler to measure out that distance in inches, drew the walls. The reason that I wanted to draw them in before I start doing anything else is that I'm going to do a lot of the flooring before a lot of the walls, because I don't want the flooring to go underneath the walls, because then my walls are hanging on to just regular paper instead of the foam board. And I really want it to attach to the foam board. I think it'll be a stronger bond. But I need to know where those walls will be before I can lay down the floor. I should also mention at this point that some of the walls, the exterior walls, are going to be permanent walls. They'll be glued into place and they won't move, but obviously want to be able to see into the house, right? So there will be some walls that will be removable and held together with magnets so that when someone wants to see what's actually in the house, we can easily pop off a wall and have a look. So I have marked out here in green the walls that are going to be removable. So this portion, at least, of the bedroom wall, so that you can see into the bedroom, this wall at the back of the porch, a portion of the wall in the kitchen, most of the dining room wall, and a smaller portion of the living room. And all of those when they're all on, you won't even know that it's a removable wall. That's my hope anyway. But then, as I said, if you want to see into the house, you can easily take those walls down and have a look. So that is the plan. I found these, and these are actually just shy of 9 inches. They are 8 7/8 inches long, and so that's the height that I'm going to make my walls. I'm going to use the length of these pieces of dowel for the wall. Now, where to find these? I found these basic in a Dollarama, and you can probably get them in a Dollar Tree or, well, probably any kind of craft shop. They are $2 for the package, and you get 5 of each size. Now, if all I was using was the middle one, which is the size I need for this wall, then maybe $2 for 5 pieces of wood, you know, maybe is a little pricey. But I also use the smaller ones for furniture. So to me, I'm using 10 pieces for $2. The reason that I like these is that they're all cut the exact same height, which is awesome, because when you're cutting stuff for miniatures, if you're out even a fraction of an inch, it can make a big impact. So I love the fact that these are all exactly the same size. So that's what I'll be using. They'll just be in, you know, different points where I just need a little bit more sturdiness for the house. So truth be told, I don't remember exactly what this flooring looked like in this house. I do remember that it was the same flooring throughout the entire house. I remember that it was nothing fancy. It was all kind of a light color, and I'm pretty sure it was linoleum. So since I don't remember exactly what it looked like, what I did was I started looking at some different options for flooring, and I found one that I think will work just based on the period of the house, like the, you know, the time frame that the house was built in. And so I went onto a website called Jennifer's Printables. And if you've never been on that website, what you'll find there is tons of different wallpaper, flooring. She does templates for miniature food, just a bunch of really cool stuff. And it's all free. All you have to do is print it. And so I found this vintage flooring that I think will work. And it's very basic. It's kind of a yellowy color. To me, yellowish kind of says old-ish. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but that's what I think. And so I thought it would probably work really well, like I said, with the time frame of the house. So that's what I'm going to use for the house. This is just printed on white cardstock, by the way, a light grade cardstock. But rather than pasting this directly onto the foundation, I'm actually going to build templates of the floor and attach it to a template. So you can use a few different things for a template. I'm going to be using this. I have these 8 by 10, or maybe they're 8.5 by 11 chipboard. And I'm going to just basically using this and some masking tape, I'm going to make a template of each of the rooms. And once I've dry fitted it to the point where it fits, then I'm going to add the flooring on top of the template, and then I'll install the whole thing. The reason I don't want to put it directly onto the floor is if I mess it up, there's no coming back. Like you don't just take it off once it's glued on, right? So I'd rather make sure that the size is correct, that the pattern matches, all that kind of fun stuff before it actually goes in to the house. Now, if you don't have chipboard, that's fine. There's lots of things that you can use to make a template. If you have cardboard from like a cereal box, that works really well. I just don't happen to have any pieces quite big enough to do it with that. The only thing that I'll caution you is is use the same type of board or mat or whatever it is you're going to use for the whole floor, because you don't want, say, a chipboard and then a piece of cardstock, because now they're not going to be the same height, right? So you just want to make sure that whatever you're using, you're consistent throughout the whole house. I'm going to show you just in one room how I lay that template out and how I measure it. And then you can basically just follow the same process for each of the rooms. So I have my 2 pieces of the chipboard, and I'm just going to take the first one. Let's see. It'll be a little short that way, so I'm going to go this way. And all I'm going to do is line it up with the edges where the walls are going to go. And then I'm just going to do a tiny little shift over so that I can see where the wall is on this side. And I'm just going to take my pencil and put a little mark there. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing. You can put it back in place on this side. And then I'm just going to cut this piece off. Up. This chipboard is pretty thick, so it usually takes a couple of runs through with the X-Acto knife to get it cut. There we go. And then I'll just remeasure just to make sure that it fits. There we go. All right, so the second piece is just going to be this little piece here. I'm going to use a second piece of chipboard, and I'm just going to make sure that it's nice and flush. I'll move it down just a hair on this side so that I can see where the wall is. And this will have to be done in 2 cuts. One to take this side and one to take that side. So I've got that measurement. Do the same on this side. Again, where the wall will be. And I'm going to cut this piece off. Go. And make sure it's a good fit. And then I'm going to measure on this side. So it doesn't slip. There. And then here. Now, you could also just measure with a measuring tape each of the walls. The problem is, though, if your wall is not 100% square, you're going to probably have little gaps. So I like to do it that way. And then if my wall isn't perfectly straight, it's still going to be the right shape. So cut this off. There we go. That's pretty gosh darn good. Okay, I'm just going to take a little piece of masking tape. Doesn't have to be a big piece. This is still going to be the top, so I'm just going to flip it over. And I'm going to put a full piece of masking tape on the bottom, all the way across that seam. All right, so there we have a template for that floor. I like to mark it so that I don't, when the time comes, try and do this. So this is the front of the house, so I'm just going to mark on this end. I'm just going to put front. You probably can't see that because it's in pencil. And then I also know that this is the top because that's the side that I wrote on. So once you've got that done, you'll basically follow the exact same process for all of the rooms. This one is quite a big room. It's going to take probably 3 or 4 pieces of board, but the process doesn't change just because the size of the room does. So, all right, I finished cutting out all of my templates. Now you will notice that the one doorway that goes from the kitchen to the living room, I've left the piece of that entryway in. And the reason that I've done that is that there was no actual door there. It was just an entryway. So I wanted the floor to be the same height. On the doorway from the bedroom into the kitchen and then the kitchen into the porch, there was an actual door. So I have to build a door frame that I can attach a door to. And the only way I can do that is to make basically a 4-sided frame for the door. So just to show you kind of what I mean, if this was the frame, and then I built the door to fit inside of it, if I kept this floor level and then placed this on top of it, then you're going to be stepping over this little piece of frame to get into the bedroom. I didn't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is because I've left that open, I'm actually going to make that bottom frame of that door so that it's actually flush with the level of the floor. And that way, you know, my little pretend dolls aren't going to pretend trip when they're coming in and out of the bedroom. So that's why I left that little piece out on the ones that have the actual doors. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do one piece at a time, with the exception maybe of this. And I'm just going to start laying my flooring onto these pieces and cover them up. I'm going to use podge to do that because podge works really well with paper. It sticks really well. But after I do each piece, I have to weight it because just like the foam board, things tend to warp a little bit or twist a little bit when they get wet, and I want them to be flat when they're dry. So we'll do that. So I'm just going to move, let's see, I'm going to start with the bedroom. So I'll move these pieces out of the way. And I had already decided that the floor pattern, just bring that up so you can see it a little bit. The floor pattern, it definitely has a pattern of this way or this way, right? So I'm going to be going this way across the back of the house. And so I want all of the floors to go the same direction. So I'm just going to not glue it on just yet. Oops. Yeah, let's go that way. And I want to make sure that when I lay this one down that the pattern matches. And as you can see, it does not. And this side will work better. Oh, look at that. That works way better. I can deal with that. I'm happy with that. So we want to make sure that the pattern is full, and then unfortunately there's going to be a little bit of piece here that is pieced in. There's not much I can do about that. The only thing I can say is that the bed sat against this wall, so hopefully you won't see too much of it. But the paper, you know, is only so big. So if I had smaller rooms, I might be able to do each room with one piece, but that is not the case. So let's glue that first piece in. It's always the most stressful part. So to put my podge in, I'm going to be using a matte podge for that as opposed to a glossy. And then I've just picked a larger paintbrush so that I'm getting it on there as quickly as possible and it doesn't start to dry before I get all the way through the sheet. So I'm going to actually put the podge on the back of the flooring as opposed to on the cardboard, because I think the cardboard will stay flat as long as I keep it weighted down. So let's get some Podge. Probably should put a piece of plastic or something down under that, but there you can see it's already starting to kind of roll up. But I'm hoping once I get it onto the chipboard, it'll lay flat. Make sure you get all the way to the edge. Alrighty. Board. Make sure it's flush. Press. And I'm just going to get a book, put a book on top of there. Great. Hopefully, when I pick that book up, it'll be on there. If it's not attached properly, I might have to go to some tacky glue, but I'm going to try the Podge first. So the Podge did hold fairly well. I did have to go underneath one of the corners, and I don't know if I didn't get the Podge all the way to the corner or maybe it just dried too quickly, but I did have to go under there with my brush and just brush the underside of the paper and stick it back down. But this is the finished floor. So as you can see, it's fully covered. This little extra strip here where the paper wasn't big enough, like I said, it's going to be hidden by the bed, so I'm not too concerned about it. And so I'm just going to go ahead, I think, and do all of the templates and cover them all. I finished covering all of the templates now with the flooring, but before we can install it, we have a couple more things that we need to do. So I'm just going to move aside the living room and the bedroom porch area, and we're going to look at the kitchen area first. So in this kitchen, there was a trap door that went down into the root cellar, and I want to recreate that trap door. Obviously, it's not going to open to a cellar, but I want to make it look like it would open if we wanted it to. So I have cut out a little template for the size of the trap door. Now, normally in real house size, a trapdoor like that would be approximately 2.5 feet wide and about 3 feet deep. So in miniature size, 2.5 inches by 3 inches is probably close to the right size. So it was somewhere in around here. And I'm just going to use the template to draw in, maybe it was closer to here, to just do a pencil drawing of that area. All right, hopefully you can see that pencil drawing. Now I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm going to just basically cut through the cardstock and a tiny bit of the chipboard underneath. We're not going to cut all the way through. Just basically a light score. And then I'm going to take my embossing tool and just lightly go over that line just to make a bit of an indent where the cut mark is. So now it looks like there's actually a break in the floor. Now there was a little ring that sat, which is what they used to pull the door open. So I found these little jump rings at the dollar store, which are primarily for making jewelry. And you can see that they're just little silver rings. So I'm going to use that as a ring to pull that up. So let's first measure out where the middle of that door will be. Go up to this line. So I'm going to make a little mark at the 1 1/4. So it will sit right about there. So I'm going to try and make a little circle. Around the ring. It's not easy with my big fingers in the way. Hopefully we can get close. Close. Look at that. All right. And then I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and cut just a little ways again through. And I'm going to cut another ring just inside. So, just going to test one more time. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to try and just kind of pick up this flooring. This last little piece. There we go. And then I'm going to use my embossing tool once again and just push that cardboard down just a touch. Then when I take my ring, it's not quite flush, but it's pretty close. Just go push that down just a little bit more. Oh, and there went my ring. Good thing I have lots. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and glue that in. And for this, I'm just going to use just a little bit of craft glue. So I'll just use my little template because I no longer need it. And my favorite applicator, which is a toothpick. I'll just use the toothpick to just run a little bit of glue in that circle. And then we'll place our ring. There. Now, it looks like it has a ring to pull that door up. And that's really, it's just more aesthetic. It's certainly not a functioning trapdoor, but it looks like it should be there. So that's the first thing that I wanted to do. The second thing that I want to do is I want to add a finish onto the floor. Because the floor is made out of paper, if you leave it the way it is, something could possibly happen to damage the floor. So maybe you accidentally scratch the floor or put a gouge in it. Maybe something gets spilled in there, and then you're left with a stain on the floor. And then you either have to pull out the floor and redo it, or you have to just live with it. So I wanted to put some protection on the floor so that if an accident happens, then there's going to be less damage to the floor. So I've done a couple of experiments off camera, and I wanted to just share the results with you, so that you can decide if you choose to put some sort of protection on the floor, kind of, you know, what your options could be and what the results might be. So this is just a piece of the cardstock. There's no finish on this. I just want to use it for comparison purposes. The first thing that I tried was just spraying it with a satin finish. So I just used this crayon satin finish spray. I picked this up at Michael's for $13. You might be able to get it cheaper in a home improvement store, but it goes a long way, so it's, I think, worth the money. He'll use it probably more than once. But as you can see, there was very little difference to the floor. And if you're doing, you know, a floor that you want to continue to look new, it might be the best option. I would do 2 coats, but make sure you let the first one dry first. Now in this case with the Homestead house, I did want a little bit of an aged look. And so I tried to do the podge second. Now the podge definitely brought out the yellow in the paper. But the podge is tricky because when you paint over paper with podge, what it does is it typically bubbles up your paper. And I'll try and include a picture of what that looked like when I first painted it. If you can be patient and allow the piece to dry completely, and that's not just dry to the touch, but dry completely at like a couple of hours to let it dry, most of those bubbles will go away. I would say probably in this case 95% of them went away, but it did still leave a tiny bit of lifting and bubbling on the edges. And so if I was to do the podge, I would probably see on all of the seams in the house this little bit of lifting. Now, I think for this house, the age would have been fine, but I can't imagine that my uncle, who looked after the farm after my grandfather passed away, I can't imagine that he would have allowed lifting in the floor. He would have fixed it immediately. So I don't want to leave any kind of lifting. What I tried third was I tried to do a combination of both. And so the first thing that I did was I sprayed it with the satin finish spray. And then once it had completely dried, then I went over it with the podge. Now you can see there is still a little bit of yellowing, which I like. It did still, even though it had been sprayed just once with the spray, it did still pick up some of that yellow from the pattern. So that's the method that I'm going to use for these floors. I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of the yellow for a more flat floor, and I'm going to have to do that to all of the pieces before we install them. Now, the painting of the podge I can do here at my desk, but the spraying of the satin finish, that's an outside job. So I'm going to do that and then we'll be back. All of the pieces have now been sprayed with the satin spray, and I've left them for about 2 hours just to make sure they're good and dry. And so now I'm just going to go ahead and paint them with the podge. So this is the porch piece, and you can hopefully you can see that that does bring out that little bit of yellow in the paper. The podge does dry clear, but I always try and go the same direction with the podge. I just think that it leaves a nicer finish than, you know, going a whole bunch of different directions. Having said that, I've never actually tried to go a ton of different directions. It's just kind of in my personality to do it all one way. But never had a bad finish by doing it that way. So put that around. All right, so we're going to let that dry. I would, when you're using podge, leave it dry for a couple of hours as well, and then you should be able to see a nice flat surface. I'm just going to put this beside just for reference because you can now certainly see the color difference in there. I'm going to go ahead and paint the rest of the pieces with the podge, and that'll bring us to the end of today's video. In our next video, we'll be building and installing the interior walls in the house, and we'll finally be installing these floors. Thank you so much for joining me. I truly appreciate it. And until next time, happy crafting.